Tattoo artists and body pissers of Reddit. What is the most uncomfortable job you have had to do? NSW. My boyfriend is a tattoo artist and owns his own shop. He once did a tattoo on an uncircumcised gentleman of a rabbit right on the head of his dong, and a top hat on the foreskin, so he would have a rabbit coming out of a hat. My buddy who is a pisser was piercing a ginormously fat lady's hood. He couldn't hold up her belly and pierce, so he ran duct tape under her gut and had her hold it up like reins while he worked. I've been piercing for about 6 years now. I've seen so many disgusting coochies, the back to front wipers, currently on their period girls, and once I saw fresh semen inside of a woman. I made a habit of putting a couple drops of lavender oil in my mask to avoid odors. It has never made sense to me that people clean their noses out before a nostril piercing but don't consider checking their lady bits before a genital piercing. You could always wear one of those plague Dr. Bird masks. I had to tattoo Snoopy's doghouse around an older woman's clam. When I asked why, she said, so when my husband annoys me I can send him to the doghouse fun times. Someone I used to know pierced his own sister's clit. He said later that he regretted it. I was getting a tattoo, and this big homeless looking guy walks in. He looks at me, my artist, and takes his shirt off. He turns around and shows us the dragon tattoo that is half complete on his back. He then looks at my artist and says, can you make that into, like, a fire truck or something? My artist just exhales deeply, as I can guess this guy does this a lot or something, and says, give me a few minutes to finish this up. At a shop in Los Angeles years ago getting some work done, asked the same question to the piercing lady. She said a guy comes in regularly, full business attire, 3-piece suite, briefcase, Oxfords, a real Patrick Bateman type. The first time in he wants to get his dong pierced, so he goes to disrobe and from his waist to his mid-thigh he is covered in Disney tattoos, like covered, Donald Duck, Mickey Mouse, Pluto, the whole gang. He also already has a dong piercing. Actually he has close to a dozen. After his initial visit he came in every few months to add a dong ring or Disney character. She said he was the weirdest client she's ever had. When I was in my 20s I was a body pisser and I managed the shop I worked at. A rather large woman requested a horizontal hood piercing. This is not uncommon. What was uncommon was her anatomy was very small. I could barely find her lady parts. So her clitoris was very small and her thighs were very large. She was also very nervous and kept clamping her thighs together. I tried helping her breath and relax. This did not help. Finally threatened her that if she didn't stop clamping her thighs together she would have a needle in her thigh and a crooked piercing. She somewhat cooperated and I finally got her piercing finished. One of my worst ever experiences in a woman's crotch. Former pisser here. I have also had this situation. Her I think, was with her and she kept shutting her legs so he wouldn't be staring at her snatch, so I had to make him leave. My friend asked my tattoo artist this question. Well, the first paid job I ever had was a bunch of stars coming out of a girl's ass crack. I also did one where a guy wanted his girlfriend's name on his arm. So, that's not the bad part, they had already broken up. I asked my artist about this and he told me a great story about this good looking blonde woman, maybe early 30s, wearing a nice suit. She came in with a picture of a dog and wanted a memorial portrait tattoo of it and set an appointment for the next week. First thing he thought was weird was that the picture of the dog looked like just some random dog picture that she found in a magazine or something. Then she shows up and informs him that she wants the tattoo on the inside of her butt cheek, like right next to her butthole. Not one to turn down an interesting story. He says, let's do it. So she strips down and spreads out and he starts. As if most of it isn't weird enough, at this point he notices that she almost seems to be getting off to it. Her squirming seemed normal at first because people do because it hurts, especially considering the location. But when she started moaning he knew something was up. He said the tattoo took about twice as long as something that size should have because he was having trouble with not laughing and also had to wipe the area constantly because it was hella moist. I used to assist in piercings and suspensions at a shop my friend owned. A guy comes in for a gish piercing. He is in a suit and tie, not out of the ordinary. At that shop there was ton of under the suit piercing and tattoo people that came in. So for the gish you have to get on your elbows and knees and more or less present. He takes off his clothes and is wearing bondage clamps on his nipples. Still, not that odd. He gets into position and I go to clean and sterilize the area while the pisser is setting up all the hardware. It may seem obvious to everyone reading this as it was to me, but our customer hadn't thought to remove his massive butt plug during undressing. The pisser clamps him and he squeaks. We exchange a little question glance. Needle goes, different squeak. Jewelry goes and he moans. He gets up off the table, puts the butt plug right back in, and goes about getting dressed. I go to prep the table and he has came all over the table. He gets dressed, pays well and tips well, and goes out the door. He came back every year to have it stretched and did the same thing, except he remembered to take the butt plug out during his undressing on subsequent visits. My friend is a tattoo artist and had some trashy lady and her gangster looking boyfriend come in wanting nasty as tattooed across her back. Because it was her boyfriend's pet name for her, my friend refused to do it. After some debate, she told them that if she still wanted the tattoo in a year, she'd do it for half off, thinking the problem was likely to take care of itself. A year later, there they are again. Reluctantly, she relented, after explaining this would be hard to remove, hard to cover up, and reminding her that it was legit permanent. 2 weeks later, she was back wanting it covered up because they broke up. He stayed with her for that year just to see if she would do it. Not a tattoo artist or pisser myself, but I remember the pisser being extremely annoyed that day. Why, you ask? A guy was in there 3 days earlier to get his member pierced. He came back 3 days later, when I was there to get a tattoo, to come back and complain because he thought it was infected. As soon as the pisser said, "Why do you think it's infected?" I saw in her face that she regretted ever asking. The guy got the piercing, and then proceeded to do his girlfriend up the Hershey Highway the next day. She spent the next half an hour nearly screaming from the stupidity of the guy's actions, even after she told him to not to get remotely down and dirty. He wasn't the brightest bulb in the box. I had to change down this woman's tongue bar. We offer a free shorter bar after the healing time, and as the newbie I got told to do it as my training. Well, first off, she smelled of actual poop, which wasn't a good start. Her whole skin and scalp area was flaking on the shop, which again wasn't that great, but hey, I'll look past and just deal with. Well, in her mouth was where the actual smell of human excrement was coming from. Every one of her teeth was covered in a yellow-white slime of plaque at least a few cm thick. The whole bar in her tongue was covered in the white slime too. I held my breath and tried to undo it, the whole time her mouth salivating a brown liquid on my hands. Literally couldn't budge the thing due to the plaque and spit, so had to get my boss lady to help me. The look in her eyes was so sad when she saw me needing help. The smell hit her too, so she held her breath and tried her best too, but accidentally bumped her teeth with her hand as she was trying, which ended up being dentures that fell out, leaving a slime trail down the lady's shirt and onto my boss's shoes, spattering this thick cream everywhere. Never have I wanted to laugh and throw up so much in all my life. Not a tattoo artist myself, but I've been around some enough to have this lovely tale. When I was 15, I went with my sister and her friend to see them get their noses pierced. While there, my sister commented on this clock hanging on the wall. It was a basic clock, with a picture of a beautiful, purple flower as the background. The guy laughs and says it is nice, and that the background is of a tattoo he did. She says that it's beautiful, but the guy can't stop snickering, so we ask about the tattoo. The tattoo is one he did on a girl's butthole. He then tells us that it was his most awkward piece he's ever done, because the entire time he was doing it, she was orgasming and squirting uncontrollably. He said he used more towels on her than half his full back pieces. After he says this, my sister goes, "So you took a picture of it and turned it into a clock?" And he says, "Yeah, I thought it'd be an awesome way to tell people this story." Last time I was getting a tattoo, I asked my artist this question. Apparently at least once a year someone tries to get the tip of their dong tattooed. He apparently has an 800 flat fee and a 300 ball handling fee with a no refunds policy. Earn it or burn it, so to speak. Apparently a guy tried and lost about 1/2 inch of the first line and bailed. Artist made $1,100 for 5 minutes of prep work and 1 second of actual tattoo time. I have been piercing for 15 years professionally now, and I can say I have probably forgotten more weird stories than I remember, but a few stand out. I was working on the strip in Las Vegas 10 years ago, and 99% of my business was tourists. One night I was finishing a body piercing, and out of the corner of my eye I see two older women walk into the studio and start looking at the body jewelry case. I let them know that I would be with them in a couple minutes. After I was done, I approached them only to realize it was a nice older lady and a middle-aged man in drag. He wasn't even trying to look like a woman. It was as if he threw this all together at the last minute for a Halloween party. Smear lipstick, crooked cheap wig, thrift store dress. The woman approaches me and politely asks me what the largest gauge I can pierce her husband's nipples at. Surprised, I showed her and her husband into my room. I let them know that he is going to need to take his dress off for me to do the piercing, and luckily he was wearing a pair of shorts underneath so it didn't get weirder. Yet, I let her know due to the size of her husband's nipples I felt comfortable doing them at an 8 gram max, 3.2 mm. She agrees and I do all my prep. As I am ready to do the piercings, she starts to stroke his wig hair and tell him he's a pretty little girl over and over. I believe some other wrong things were said that I blocked out. He took both piercings very well, and after we finished he sat up and thanked me, in a deep manly voice, very politely, and slipped me a very nice tip. As we were finishing up with aftercare instructions and things are about done, the wife turns around to ask one last question. She asks if I also do body modification work. I answer yes, and she reaches into her purse and pulls out a giant metal butt plug. Before I could really adjust to what I was seeing, she asks me, is there any way that you know of that we could pierce this into him? She explained that they would drill holes around the base of the plug to attach the rings. The point of it being she would be the one who would control when it was in and when it was out, since he wouldn't be able to remove it himself. I let her know that this was way out of my field of expertise and gave her the name of a practitioner in my field that is known for the S&M side of our industry. She thanked me and gave me another large tip and let me know it was for being so professional and not laughing or judging them. Turns out this was the last hour of their vacation and they were on their way back to rural Iowa, where he was a school principal and she was quilter. TLDR pierced her old man in drag while his wife told him he was a pretty girl, then asks me if I can pierce a butt plug into him. A co-worker of my dad's used to run a piercing tattoo studio before he got into the IT business. He got an email from a guy asking if it was possible for him to progressively gauge out his dong hole to the point where another man could frick him up his own wang. That email got moved straight to the trash folder. It is possible, for anyone wondering. My artist told me that when he was tattooing in Phoenix, a woman would come in on a regular basis to have him dry line, tattooing without ink, her inner thigh. She would apparently pay for his time and tip him well if she was satisfied. A guy wanted a tattoo of a piercing, so fricking meet her. I had a friend that got that done on her ears because she was allergic to nickel, and rather than see a pro for a try at a more inert metal, she let her scratch her uncle tattoo these nasty fricking flowers or clovers or something unidentifiable on her earlobes, in his backyard. I had to write the word gooch on. Well, I'll let you guess. There's a locally known guy in my area called Pat the Tat. Dude has a lot of tattoos and is an old school punk. He's a bit of a loose cannon and an all-round oddball but a nice guy. One day he walked into a tattoo parlor and asked to get a tattoo of a coochie on the back of his head. This might seem like an odd request, but for Pat it wasn't as odd as all that. His tattoo artist said sure and asked if he had an idea of what sort of coochie he would like. Pat didn't mind and asked him to draw what he wanted. The tattoo artist had fricked someone the night before, so he drew that coochie from memory, showed it to Pat, who was happy with the design and said go ahead. After it was finished, Pat got chatting to his artist and asked who this girl was he'd banged the night before. Turns out it was Pat's sister. The guy happily tells this story to anyone who asks about his tattoo, and he still finds it funny he's got a tattoo of his sister's coochie on the back of his head. I'm not sure what his sister thinks about it. I would have to go with the time a woman came in and wanted 9 piercings and 2 tattoos in one sitting. She wanted 3 new piercings on each ear. I believe she already had 2 for both, a nose piercing, tongue piercing, and 1 for her clit. Afterward, she wanted 2 small tattoos that were roughly the size of a playing card. As the shop apprentice, I began getting all of the piercing equipment out and ready for the pisser to let him take over for the application. She does fairly well with the ear piercings, but really begins to yell a bit when it comes to the nose and tongue piercings. So things are feeling a bit uneasy. Time rolls around for the hood piercing, and I'm told to leave, obviously, which is when the woman really began to seem a bit frisky with the pisser. Someone new walked into the shop, so I began to talk about some of the art portfolios until the loudest screams I've ever heard erupt from the station behind me. The potential client I was talking to states it's probably better if she comes back at a later date and leaves, all while I hear the pisser telling this woman to calm down. Job is done. And as I walk back past the piercing station, this woman jumps up on the counter in front of the mirror and is thrusting her hips forward and starts rambling on about how badass it looks. Later saw her lead our pisser into the small bathroom at the back of the shop. Not a pisser, but in the early 2000s, I dated a girl who got her nipples pierced. Not that uncomfortable, but she showed her mom, and her mom asked if we'd drive her to the place because she wanted to get hers done, and she did. An old roommate did tattoos and piercings. I get home from work, walk into the kitchen, and see this dude spread eagle laying on the counter getting his dong pierced by my roommate. Before I say anything, my roommate says they wouldn't let us do it at the shop, and the guy getting his dong pierced looks at me and says sup, grabbed the beer from the fridge and watched the magic happen. My early years were freaking crazy. I saw a waitress get her nipples pierced at a bar in Milwaukee years ago. Everyone was gathered around, wincing. I said to a girl next to me, Jesus, that's gotta hurt. She immediately whipped the neck of her sweater down, exposing her pierced boob, and said, nah, it's not too bad. Casually scrolling through wondering if the tattooist who did the eyes on my ass has commented, so far I am safe. You've been spotted by the curious cow, comment below and let him know what you're doing. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check out another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.